Hello and welcome to Metacast episode 59. I'm your host Ilya Bezdilev.
Hey, I'm Arnab.
We are co-founders of Metacast, a podcast app like no other that has transcripts where you can listen to podcasts, you can read podcasts, you can save bookmarks for podcasts, you can share quotes from podcasts. We also have awesome playlists and a bunch of new stuff coming soon. And this is our Metacast behind the scenes podcast where we build in public and we share how it goes. So today is episode 59, which means that we've been building Metacast for over a year at this point, and we have some really exciting news to share.
Yeah. And I was just thinking about it. The first episode we ever recorded for the podcast. We started the podcast before we started working on the app. That was in October 22. In a couple of months, we'll be 2 years from the first recording, although we launched the podcast in January. So
Right. We were like, let's start the podcast and then quickly build the app so we can launch it. And then we are at episode 59 right now, and we've just launched the app on the Google Play Store. To be clear, the app has been in private beta and then in public beta for a while, for a few months. We launched public beta in February and we launched private beta in August last year, so almost actually a year ago. Yeah, it took us actually a year from the private beta to public launch. But yay, congrats to us.
yay! We launched it last Friday. Today we're recording on a Wednesday.
Yeah, we're recording this on Wednesday, August the 7th, which means we launched it on minus 5 days, is on August 2nd.
Yeah. Cool. And in the behind the scenes podcast, this one, we try to go behind some of the business. Today we're going to talk about the launch, what kind of features we decided not to include because there was no time, what did we include, what did we think about pricing, how did we think about premium subscriptions and all that, and also the process. And another thing we strive to do is keep this behind the scenes podcast to 30 minutes. But Ilya and I live in different planets where time goes a little slower. So sometimes the 30 minutes becomes more like 45 minutes, but we'll try to keep it to 30 minutes on Earth time this time.
Right, it's like under Spice where time slows down. And
Yeah.
it's a different book, I think, but we've talked about Dune so much. Anyway, 30-minute challenge. What does Alexa say? 30 minutes, starting now.
Yes. All right, so let's talk about the preparation leading up to the launch. Of course, we've been building the app for a while. I think maybe a couple of months back, we had pretty much of the features done, but we had some pretty big problems in the app, like audio playing and all that, and those were gnarly to figure out, so those we had to do. And adding on subscriptions took a while too. But generally speaking, the last few weeks we've been thinking about pricing, features, can we include anything else or just this is it, let's go, and all that. So yeah, let's talk about pricing first, Ilya.
Yeah. First of all, podcast apps are free. I mean, apps like Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Well, I guess Spotify is sort of free because it has ads and you also pay the premium subscription to listen to music.
YouTube Music, is it free?
I don't know.
Yeah, because I use it, not for podcasts, I use it for music, but I have been paying YouTube for a while now. So
Right. So yeah, one of the questions actually we got from somebody on LinkedIn, they asked, well, Apple Podcast is free. Why should I buy your app, right? There are a couple of differentiating points from the free apps that Metacast has, right? So let's start with this because then it backs up into pricing.
Also, before we get to the differentiating things, Metacast, you can use it absolutely free. Just like any other podcast app, or pretty much just like some of the other podcast apps. You can listen to podcasts, you can find any podcast, you can use it as an audio player pretty much free. On top of that, we have some differentiating features, and to use those in a pretty much unlimited fashion is what you need to pay for. So yeah, let's talk about those features, yeah.
Right, that's a very good point. It's just like if I was a user of Metacast, I would just pay the first day because I want the features that differentiate Metacast from the other apps. Also, maybe to just back up a little, when we first started, we thought we just added transcript and that's going to be great. But then Apple Podcasts and Spotify added those features as well. So transcripts are sort of table stakes at this point, I think. Independent apps, most of them don't have transcripts yet, but I think it will become table stakes at this point. So what we've done differently from Apple Podcasts and Spotify and others, we really thought deeply about what do you want the transcript for. So it's not just an accessibility feature, even though it's great for accessibility. It is a tool for acquiring and retaining knowledge that you hear in podcasts. So we've made our transcripts, basically, that's not something that you click to access. We could almost say we are a transcript-first podcast app, where the transcript and audio go hand in hand together, and you can use the transcript to make bookmarks, you can share quotes, you can save those quotes, and we'll be building more and more features that help you quickly save things that you've heard, access them later, search them, share them, etc. So this is for the user who doesn't just listen to podcasts for entertainment, but wants to get stuff from it. Like you highlight a book and you want to go back to that. So you can do the same thing with podcasts, with Metacast, but not necessarily with other apps.
To give a little bit of background, let's say a year back, there were no apps that would show you the transcript. And what that means is podcasts were purely audio medium, so you could listen to it.
There was one app, to be fair.
Oh, there was one. Okay, one or two like small apps, but let's say for the majority, there were none. So what that means is you had to like listen to it. And for portions that you wanted to remember or you wanted to share with others, there was just no way. You could share the whole episode with somebody, but good luck to them to find out that 5-minute segment in an hour-long episode. So then we started working on this idea of bringing out the information from the audio into a visual, like a book kind of format, and that's what the transcript is for. And then before we were done, Apple also launched something similar. But I think what Ilya, you're saying is Apple and Spotify to a larger extent, they kind of use the transcript as almost like lyrics in a song. It's kind of like there. If you want to go there, yeah, sure, it's there. Apple does a better job, I would say. But for us, it's like as you're listening, the specific part of the transcript is syncing up with your listening. There are some caveats, but for the most part, this is what happens. As you're listening, you can swipe the transcript and say, yes, this is interesting, or like, I want to save this for later, or I want to bookmark this. Using the words in the transcript, you can type in things. So let's say that you did not bookmark something. You listened to something awesome, you didn't bookmark. Later on, you can load up the episode again, search for a specific word, and then go to that exact segment. So these are cool things we do in our app.
I can actually make a comparison. So imagine you walk in a city and there is a wall that has a book printed on it. So you could walk to that wall, read the book, and then move on, and you never come back to that wall again because you've gone past it. Or you could have a paper book that you read, and then you make notes, you could highlight, you put it in your bookshelf, and then whenever you want to, like, oh, I remember reading about this in that book, and you pull that book from the shelf, quickly find those notes, and reread and refresh your memory about what you've heard. Or you can walk back to that wall a few blocks away. Well, first of all, you have to find that spot where it was, and then you need to find where exactly that huge wall of text you saw that. And that's kind of the experience in Apple Podcasts or Spotify versus Metacast. So I think most users will not need what we have, but we really want the users who want to get the knowledge, who want to get the information, who want to get the insights from podcasts, to be able to just grab them as quickly as I'm describing with the paper book, but even quicker, because we will also add search and other things. And we also have some really cool ideas about that information that you save, but that will come at a later stage. The other thing that makes Metacast different from actually all other apps, I would say, is what you just said. When you want to share a podcast or an episode with somebody, if you want to do it from Apple Podcasts or Spotify, you get an Apple Podcast or Spotify link. And if the other person uses another app, they can see the title of the podcast and they have to find the podcast, find the episode. It's all complicated. And the reason why those other apps do this, first of all, I think Apple and Spotify, they are very big and they don't care. But the second reason, actually maybe the primary reason, they want to drive traffic to their apps. So if I send you a link to an episode on Apple Podcasts, and it opens an Apple Podcasts for you because you also have an iPhone, then maybe you listen to an Apple Podcasts and start using Apple Podcasts instead of whatever you're using, right? I think that's how those apps grow. So we decided to do it different. So even though obviously we want people to download Metacast and listen to the podcast in the Metacast app, but we also realized that people are less likely to share the link with somebody if they don't know what app they're using, especially if it's like a small app. But we've done the sharing in a way that it has links to the other big apps like Apple Podcasts and Spotify and YouTube. I think we'll add more apps there as well where we can. So we do a little bit of extra work to add those links, but it makes episodes that you listen to on Metacast more shareable. And also as we go forward, we will be adding more of those nice features to the website. Like if you share a specific quote, we will display it on the site. So if the person doesn't want to listen to the podcast and they don't have Metacast, they can still see and read what you want to share with them. So podcast is a weird medium in this case, because if you want to share an article, people can skim it and decide if they wanted to read the whole thing, or they can just read the quote that you shared with them. With audio, like you send me like a 4-hour-long Lex episode, I may or may not, most likely not, listen to that whole episode. But we make it easy to just see the bits that you wanted to share.
Yeah. And we have like lots of other ideas and features coming up in that space, but we decided, okay, this is like good enough to launch the first version with. The other thing that's pretty interesting, we're not the only app that does this, but not a lot of apps do this pretty well, is playlists. So what you do in Metacast is you come in, you look for the podcast that you like, you follow them. And when you follow them, we don't have any notifications or anything like that. We don't bombard you. We don't pull you back into the app. Instead, when you come to the app, it's front and center for you to tell you, it visually tells you which podcasts have new episodes that you haven't seen before. And when you see one, just like in an email client, you can swipe it and add it to like a listen later playlist. And so far, we have listen later and downloads to playlists. We're going to add more playlists as well as allow users to create their own custom playlists soon.
Yes. Surprisingly, Apple still doesn't have playlists, so it's a differentiator on iOS in this regard. But I think they will add playlists at some point. I just can't see them not adding playlists.
For a long time, Apple Podcast was really stagnant. Like there was no features coming for the longest time. Then something happened last year. So I'm also expecting that they'll start working on it more and more now. So
yeah. One thing that you will find in Metacast is just how much easier it is to manage a large number of podcasts that you follow. Like I follow 65, I think, podcasts. I think you follow about 55. Last time I looked at our data, about 60 on average. I never have problems triaging the new episodes that come out. And obviously, there is a lot more content that comes out than I listen. I probably listen to maybe 5 episodes per week, maybe 5-6 episodes per week max. And I probably get like 50 episodes per week published on those podcasts. And obviously, I don't listen to even a fraction of them. The other apps, they really don't optimize for helping you be in control of what you listen. So if you subscribe to 50 podcasts on Apple or Spotify, I would say good luck figuring out, what's new. And if that new is interesting, you will just get lost tapping in those, especially in Spotify, because it's also mixed up with music. So basically, we make it easier for the podcast lovers to really be in love and stay in love and listen to the podcasts that they want to listen to.
So those are the features we have at launch. There are a few more things, but that's pretty much the highlight of it, right? What are the big things we decided to punt on?
So we actually started talking about pricing, but then we started to describe how great Metacast is.
After this whole thing of what we decided to include, what we decided to punt, we'll go back to how we decided on what's the pricing.
Yeah, so keep listening.
Yeah.
It's like one of those videos where they almost about to tell you the thing that you came to hear, and then they just keep postponing it while selling whatever they think they sell. The features we punted on, well, the whole iOS app we punted on, I think this is an important thing here. We did want to launch on both platforms at the same time-ish, because we use Flutter to develop, and we are iOS users. We have been using Metacast for a while. But there are a couple of bugs that we couldn't fix before the Android launch.
iOS-specific bugs.
Yes, iOS-specific bugs. It dates back to actually a few months. We were like, should we just focus on one platform instead? Because fixing those bugs on iOS does not help us with Android. So we were like, okay, so let's just launch on Android, get one platform.
And Google Podcast decided to shut down. By the way, on the Killed by Google side note, I just heard that Chromecast is being deprecated this morning.
Okay, deprecate *cast.
Yeah. So Google decided to shut down their podcast app. So we were like, okay, we should focus on launching on Android first. So that's what we did, and we launched recently, yeah.
Even I said *cast, I almost felt like deprecation is a regular expression at Google.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Sorry.
Wildcard deprecate, yeah.
When you use Google, you sign up for a wildcard because you don't know what they're going to be deprecating.
Right. You know, in AWS, we had one of the best things about AWS Android. Again, quick side note. We'll get back to the pricing, I promise, within the next 7-8 minutes. But in AWS, one of the best things I enjoyed was there was a Wednesday morning ops meeting that everybody in AWS, basically from the AWS heads, like CEOs pretty much, down to managers and engineers, pretty much anybody who could make it would make it. And especially the senior leaders would always be there. And we would discuss things that happened, good things, bad things, and all that. But most of that meeting, an hour and a half meeting, was this Wheel of Fortune type spin the wheel where you pick up. AWS had 60 or 80 services at that point. There's probably way more now. So there would be 60 or 80 things on a board. You can imagine those lottery boards, things like that.
I think it's called a roulette in casinos. But instead of numbers and colors, you have EC2, S3, AWS chatbot, all those services. Yeah.
Yeah. So you spin it and then you pick up one service from there and then you go deep dive into it. What I was wondering was maybe Google has something like that to decide what product to deprecate next.
Right.
Because it comes so frequently and it's shocking sometimes. What? Yeah, doesn't make sense. Anyway, back into the features. So yeah, we decided to punt on iOS. We decided to launch Android.
Yeah, also Android Auto was not working properly at the time of launch. We've almost fixed that. Almost as in we have a fix, but we now need to get through the Google Play approval process.
To be clear, Android Auto, we didn't actually have Android Auto supported at all. So whatever you can play is through the background, kind of mechanism of Android Auto. Now we are going to launch a full-fledged Android Auto app very soon too.
Yep. We also punted on a bunch of playlists that we wanted to include. We wanted to have a playlist of all of your new episodes that you can easily use to triage all of the new content coming in. Those who use Metacast would know that we have the continue listening bar at the top of the home screen that you can scroll to find the episodes that you started but never finished. So that is also a playlist that we don't expose yet.
Basically, in any podcast app, you pick up an episode. As you're listening to it, great. You can stop the episode, go shop, come back, pick it up. But if you're switching between 2-3 episodes at the same time, let's say I'm listening to a long Lex episode. It's the latest one was 8 hours. That was insane. Anyway, you can't finish that in one shot. And meanwhile, something important has happened. I don't know, maybe Donald Trump got shot or something like that, right? And all the politics podcasts are buzzing right now. So you pick up those episodes. In any other app, those previous episodes you were listening to are gone. It's impossible to find them.
Yeah, it's like that wall of text in the city block. You turn around and there's a glare in your eyes. You just can't find where you were before.
Yeah. So in Metacast, at the home screen, we have a list of everything that you have not completed, that you have been listening to recently in there. But we wanted to also make that a playlist and have a history of everything you have ever listened to. So those did not make the cut. We will get to them shortly. I'd say one more significant thing we decided to cut corners on is the transcript itself. We have a basic transcript. We know there are inaccuracies once in a while. Depending on the speaker and all that, there are problems with it, right? But we did build a better version of the transcript that identifies different speakers and all that. But we decided this is too expensive to run right now, so we punted on that. That's another thing I think we're going to pick up, and the transcripts that you see in the app are going to be super crisp. You will know who's speaking what and may be able to search by the speaker.
Right. And we also wanted to use the transcripts provided by creators for the podcasts that have those transcripts specified in their feed. Yeah, some of those transcripts are much better quality than what we can get with AI. But obviously there are different formats and there's work to make those conform to what we need. And yeah, that we punted on. We did experiment. We imported one of the rework transcripts I forgot which episode it was. It was probably 3 or 4 months ago. It looks nice. It has the speaker names where Jason is talking, where Kimberly or DHH are talking in different colors. It looks really nice. Actually, you can get a glimpse of this if you install the app. And there is the intro episode for Metacast itself. It has a speaker recognition in there. So we do have the functionality built into the app. It's just the transcripts that we use. They don't have that yet, but we will add that pretty soon, I would say.
Okay, so with the features that we decided to include and the ones we decided were punting, what is the pricing we came to?
Well, I guess we came to pricing is $49.99. I think it's the pricing of $49.90, whatever it is.
$49.99, basically $50 USD per year.
$50 USD per year or $5 USD per month, which means you get 2 months for free if you sign up for the annual subscription compared to monthly. So if you pay month by month, you end up paying $60 in a year.
In the US, that's like getting a regularish coffee at Starbucks, I would say, like one coffee.
You've probably not been to Starbucks in the US for a while. I think last time I paid something like $7.50.
That must have been like a Frappuccino or something like that.
Yeah, it was just a regular latte with one of those vegetable milks. But I think you're right. If you get one of those coffees from the drip coffee, the one that sits there for like 2 hours before they serve it to you, that kind of coffee, the shittiest coffee you find in the store. So for the price of 12 of those, or one of those per month, you get access to the wealth of knowledge in Metacast. One more differentiating thing is I think Apple and Spotify, they transcribe mostly new podcasts, mostly new episodes that come in. I'm not sure if Spotify even transcribes things that are not hosted on Spotify itself. Apple, I think, only transcribes the new episodes, and maybe they go back on some of the podcasts. We do it differently. We transcribe whatever you're listening to. If you add an episode to the Listen Later playlist, we will start a background job to transcribe it for you. So maybe by the time you get to the episode, it's already transcribed. If you start listening to it right away and nobody else listened to it before, which means there is no transcript, we kick off the transcription job. 2, 3, 5 minutes later, depending on the length of the episode, you get the transcript. That is one of the key differentiating factors for now too. Anyway, so coming back to pricing, we also have a launch special, which is $24.50, I think. It's basically like 50% off, half off. And the cool thing here is you get this price if you sign up for the annual subscription, but you get this price for 2 years. So if you pay for the first year, and then at the end of the first year, you have the option to renew at the same price. So you only start paying the full price at year 3. I think it's a really good deal. So basically you get 2 years for the price of 1 year, but you only pay half. It's confusing to explain. But the point is, so if you sign up now, but till the end of August, you get Metacast for $24.50 USD or equivalent in your currency in another country. And at the end of year 1, you can renew for the same price. We made this special, I think, mostly to help our existing users transition, because we had all of these features for free in beta, and we put a paywall when we launched. And we decided that it will be just too expensive to build discount codes and all that stuff. So we just give everybody this pricing. But the initial intention was to give this pricing to the existing users who have been supporting us for months at this point and given us great feedback.
Yeah. And I think we'll do something like similar for iOS users when we launch on iOS also.
But how did you come up with the number?
Exactly. So today we were also going to talk about the process of arriving at the number as well as the whole launch process. And it's clear that that's not going to fit in half an hour. So the whole launch process, including like what were the steps, how did we decide to launch? There are some interesting complicated pieces. We'll maybe talk about it in the next episode. But let's close today with figuring out why is it $50? How did we arrive at that?
So we thought $5 is a great price by looking at what other apps charge, not just podcast apps, but apps in general. The productivity apps, also apps that are sort of nice to have. Metacast is not a business critical app. It's not an app that somebody will pay $20 per month because it solves a huge problem for them. It's an app that needs to cost such that it helps you do what you do, but it doesn't hurt your wallet. $50 or $5 a month just felt like the right amount, because anything below that felt too low, also because we have costs to operate the app, and also there is a sort of market size. So going below $5 makes it unattractive for us. But I remember setting the price, I think it was $6.99, so $7. We installed this and it had the feature flag on our phones, and we looked at it. I'm like, it feels expensive. And I think we talked about it and it made sense, but when we actually saw it on our phones, $7 a month just felt wrong. And that's why we went down to $4.99 or basically $5 per month. There is this, it's not theory, it's empirical. They say that luxury products usually have even prices. Like an iPhone doesn't cost $899.99, right, or something. It costs whatever, $850. It doesn't have this stupid sense. Or like if you go buy a Gucci bag or something, it costs like whatever, $1,400.
Yeah, I was way off, but okay.
It doesn't cost $13.99, right? And that sort of signals luxury. Whereas for everyday goods, you have this $0.99 nonsense all over the place, whatever store you go to. But the fact is, empirically, it's research-based, it works. So people do think it's cheaper, even though it's just 1 cent, because the bigger number in dollars is 1 less. It's 4, right? So there is some psychological barrier there. So that's why we also did what others are doing. Actually, the cool thing there, in Apple and Google, when you add the prices, it calculates the prices for you in other countries. And when I looked at Singapore, it has not 99 cents, but like 98 cents. They have a list of values that they can choose from, and it's all like 98 cents. And now I actually remember, because I used to live in that country, that's some kind of like a cultural thing, because I saw it elsewhere too. They don't do 99, they do 98 cents. As bizarre as it looks, there is probably some history of why it is like that in Singapore.
Right, we do equivalent pricing. So it's $4.99 if you're using the US Android marketplace. It's $4.99 per month or $49.99 per year. If you're in another country, you will see like your local pricing equivalent to this Starbucks coffee pricing, basically we're talking about.
And if you're in a country that have, lower income levels than the United States or North America, and you feel like our price is too high in your country, send us an email along with the picture of how much a Starbucks coffee costs in your country.
What about places where there are no Starbucks, Ilya? Even back in India, I want to say maybe last 10 years or so, but even some of the bigger cities had Starbucks only recently in the last 5-6 years. So
let's say go to an upscale coffee shop. Upscale is in pretty good, upper middle class coffee shop.
Okay. We'll start to close this episode in the interest of time. And the process of launching, including the checklist, verification with Google, approval, we actually had Google reject us after they approved us the first time. We'll talk about all this in the next episode. So like we always do, we love podcasts, so we talk about what we're listening to. We would love to hear what you're listening to, Ilya, first, and then the users too. If you want to share, email us at hello@metacastpodcast. But Ilya, you go first.
Yeah, send us your recommendations. I've been traveling a lot in the last couple of months. On a plane, I've been reading a lot. It just made it easier. So I got a new Kindle Paperwhite Signature, I think it's called. It's like the most expensive Kindle there is now from the smaller devices. They used to have Kindle Oasis, which was really, really good, but they deprecated it, one of the deprecations from Amazon. I fell in love with ebooks again. So I started reading Neil Gaiman's books. Basically, I just look at what has Neil Gaiman written and I just read them because I want to read everything that he's written. So I've read Anansi Boys. It's a nice fantasy book about stories. It takes place in England, but also in a parallel dimension. Really, really nice. If not for sex, I would even say even our kids could read this, but because it has a bit of violence and sex in there, I wouldn't recommend this to anyone younger than 18. Yeah, I also started reading Neverwhere, which is another book of his. Also awesome books.
That's the one also in London, the tunnels.
Yeah, I think it's the tunnels. I started reading it about a month ago and then I stopped. There's like a parallel dimension in London too, in tunnels at the underground, and like different creatures there that help the other creature that is sort of with humans. It's interesting. Like I'm just fascinated by his imagination and I like reading his books. And as far as podcasts, I've been only binging on one podcast. It's a Russian podcast called The Declaration or Deklaratsiya in Russian. I don't think it's relevant to most of our listeners, but it's a great business podcast. I actually posted in my Telegram channel. I'm like, yeah, I'm listening to this guy and I'm really liking him. And one person asked, like, why do you listen to him and not to the Western business gurus and all? And it actually got me thinking. I'm like, a lot of things he says you can find in Simon Sinek's or Tony Robinson Robinson podcasts or their books, but just culturally, because of the language, because of the expressions, because of the context. Even if what he says is a copy-paste from what they say, it just lands so much better with me. And I underappreciated it until I discovered him So that's me.
Right. So since we recorded last time, I feel like it's been about 3-4 weeks. The world, I feel like, is on a speed run over the last few years, but even more recently because I'm a lot into sports. So Wimbledon finished up. That was epic. Then Olympics started. They're still going on, but the Olympics, the tennis part of it, which was insanely good and epic, that finished up. So I was listening to a lot of that. Then there was a Trump assassination attempt, Biden stepping down from the presidency, and then Kamala Harris becoming this, and then she chose her new VP choice. So I've been consuming a lot of podcasts. I found recommendations for a few independent podcasts, right? So there is one. I'm still listening to a lot of them, so I'll bring up the names next time after I really feel like this is worth recommending. But there is one that I've started liking where it's basically a Democratic supporter and a Republican supporter, and they're really good at talking with each other, like in a civilized manner, as we all should. And that's kind of different from today's world of politics where everybody's just shouting past each other. So I really am liking that podcast, but I'll listen to a few more episodes, and next time, if I keep listening, if I keep liking, I'll do that. But the one episode I'll talk about, mentioned today, is Star Talk. So I'm also like into astronomy and listen to a lot of sciencey podcasts. Shortwave and Star Talk are my favorites. Star Talk, not all episodes are equal, but listen to this latest episode from August 6th, so yesterday, which is about the story of Planet X. Star Talk is hosted by Neil deGrasse Tyson, very famous astronomer and like a public figure. The interesting part is he's joined by a stand-up comedian on the podcast always. Sometimes it's not that funny, to be honest, but this one was hilarious. And the way that Neil deGrasse Tyson goes through the history of how we found out Neptune and then the hunt for the next planet, but they did pan out and we found Pluto. It was so beautifully done.
How long is it?
I want to say about 40 minutes, not too long.
Oh, I think I'm confusing it with the hard history.
The hardcore history. No, those are long episodes, but he does maybe one a year or so because they're more like books. This is Star Talk, yeah.
Yeah, and we did a little hack this time to get us to the 30 minutes mark. You have a meeting starting in a few seconds. So let's close this recording by telling people where they can download Metacast if they haven't already.
Yeah, metacastapp. We would love to hear back from you. Send us an email at hello@metacastpodcast.com. And we would love to hear back about this podcast, about the app itself, or your recommendations, what you're listening to, what do you love to listen to, yeah.
Yeah, and if you enjoy the app, please give it a 5-star rating on Google Play Store. If you don't like it, don't give it a rating, send us an email. And we will see if we can make it work and make you, whatever, add the things that you are missing or maybe explain the things that are not clear, change the app and make sure that you like it. It works for you. I mean, we can't promise that we will make it work for everybody. Maybe it's just not the app for you. But if there are obvious bugs, don't give it 1 star and say like, oh, it sucks because I cannot listen to this podcast. We will just make it possible to listen to the podcast that you can't listen to. All right, then, ciao.
Adios. Okay.
Amigos.
All right. See you next time.